In this lecture, we will review what exactly is non-experimental research. Non-experimental research falls into three broad categories: cross-sectional research, correlational research, and observational research. Non-experimental research techniques includes naturalistic observation, ethnography, case study, archival research, and content analysis. Now let's review some terms. While descriptive research is essentially a type of non-experimental research, the key difference is that descriptive research specifically focuses on observing and describing characteristics of a population or phenomenon without manipulating variables, whereas non-experimental research encompasses a broader category of studies that do not involve manipulating variables, including descriptive, correlational, and sometimes even quasi-experimental designs. Essentially, descriptive research is a subset of non-experimental research that solely aims to describe, not necessarily to establish cause and effect relationships. So just remember, for descriptive research, it aims to accurately portray the current state of a phenomena by collecting and reporting data on variables without manipulating them. It often uses tools like surveys, observations, and case studies, and it cannot establish causal relationships. For non-experimental research, it encompasses any research design where variables are not actively manipulated by the researcher. It also can include descriptive studies, correlational studies, and certain types of comparative studies. And it may not be able to establish causation depending on the specific design. So, really, what is non-experimental research? Well, it is a research type that lacks the manipulation of independent variables. Rather than manipulating an independent variable, researchers conducting non-experimental research simply measure variables as they naturally occur, whether it's in the lab or the real world. In research, variables are any characteristics that can take on different values, such as height, age, temperature, or test scores. Researchers often manipulate or measure independent and dependent variables in studies to test cause and effect relationships. So the independent variable is the cause. Its value is independent of other variables in your study. And the dependent variable is the effect. Its value depends on changes in the independent variable. So for non-experimental research, it is research that lacks the manipulation of an independent variable. Rather than manipulating an independent variable, researchers conducting non-experimental research simply measure variables as they naturally occur, whether in the lab or in the real world. Now, most researchers in psychology consider the distinction between experimental and non-experimental research to be an extremely important one. This is because although experimental research can provide strong evidence that changes an independent variable cause differences in a dependent variable, non-experimental research generally cannot. As we will see, however, this inability to make causal conclusions does not mean that non-experimental research is less important than experimental research. Now let's review the types of non-experimental research. Non-experimental research falls into three broad categories: cross-sectional research, correlational research, and observational research. In cross-sectional research, it involves comparing two or more pre-existing groups of people. What makes this approach non-experimental is that there is no manipulation of the independent variable and no random assignment of participants to group. Now, in correlational research, it is the most common type of non-experimental research conducted in psychology. Correlational research is considered non-experimental because it focuses on the statistical relationship between two variables, but does not include the manipulation of an independent variable. More specifically, in correlational research, the researcher measures two continuous variables with little or no attempt to control extraneous variables and then assesses the relationship between them. In observational research is non-experimental because it focuses on making observations of behavior in its natural or laboratory setting without manipulating anything. Milgram's original obedience study was non-experimental in this way. He was primarily interested in the extent to which participants obeyed the researcher when he told them to shock the Confederate, and he observed all participants performing the same task under the same conditions. Well, according to Bordens and Abbott in 2022, observational research involves observing and recording the behaviors of your subjects. This can be accomplished either in the field or in the lab, human or animal subjects. Multiple observers should be used. And non-experimental techniques include naturalistic observation, case study, archival research, and content analysis. Natural observation is making careful, unobtrusive observations of subjects in their natural environment so that you do not alter their natural behavior. Now, ethnography is getting immersed in a behavioral or social system so it can be studied. It can be run as a participant observation, and that means basically the researcher becomes a member of a particular group, or as a non-participant observation, and that basically means the researcher is a non-participating observer. Okay, so case study is another term to know. It is a non-experimental descriptive research technique in which an individual case is studied intensively to uncover its history, like, for example, a patient in therapy. Archival research is a non-experimental descriptive research strategy that involves studying existing records. And content analysis is another non-experimental descriptive research technique used to analyze a written or spoken word or other content for the occurrence of specific categories of events or behaviors. And behavior categories must be developed. Now, the key takeaways here is that non-experimental research is research that lacks the manipulation of an independent variable. There are two broad types of non-experimental research: correlational and observational. In correlational research, it focuses on statistical relationships between variables that are measured but not manipulated, and observational research in which participants are observed and their behavior is recorded without the researcher interfering or manipulating any variables. So again, non-experimental research is research that lacks the manipulation of an independent variable. Rather than manipulating an independent variable, researchers conduct non-experimental research, simply measure variables as they naturally occur. And remember, that can be in the laboratory or in the real world.